What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Steelers Saturday Sit Down with Around the 412. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Tyler Weeks. Tyler, it's about 8 a.m. where you are. How are we feeling this morning?
I'm feeling good. I've been up since 6 a.m. Had to take a few friends to the airport this morning.
Okay.
So
Well.
I've been awake for a little while now, and I'm feeling better today than I was yesterday morning. I gotta say, Friday morning after losing a Thursday night game, especially to who you lose it to, is not fun when you're a Steelers fan. The
Sure.
game really what brought me down a little bit, but at the same time, I saw a lot of takes about this game before the game, during the game, after the game, making it seem like this was probably the worst loss ever for the Steelers, which I think is a big exaggeration. There's no way they should have lost to the 2-8 Browns on Thursday Night Football. And you and I kind of talked about on our Steelers show this week reasons why this game is not going to be so easy for the Steelers. And I thought that throughout this game. And while it didn't necessarily play out like I thought it would, in the way it actually played out is more frustrating than just flat out losing the game. But this was always going to be a tough game for the Steelers. I mean, it was tough for both teams, both coming off of short weeks. And then considering the factor of it was a snow game as well, that plays its own factor into everything. This game was frustrating, but at the same time, if you're a Steeler fan or just a football fan in general that thought the Steelers should have just walked into Cleveland and won by 3 touchdowns, I just don't think that was ever going to be in the realm of possibility. So I think that the expectations probably needed to be lowered by some people, and it definitely was after this game. But a frustrating loss, but not one that I would say nobody saw coming. It was very realistic that the Steelers could have lost this game despite playing the 2-8 Browns.
Alan Saunders, who I host the Steelers Afternoon Drive with, actually picked the Browns to win this game. He said he's had this circled as a loss for the Steelers since the schedule came out. Short week after playing Baltimore in Cleveland, where the Steelers have not had much success. They've not had much success on the road on Thursday Night Football in general. And yeah, Cleveland has kind of had their number. Like I put out a take on Twitter. I feel like it's kind of like Cleveland has been to us what we've been to the Ravens over the last few years. So Boston pointing out that Allen did also pick the Ravens, so that's true. But my dad came home from work and he's like, too many people are saying it. I don't have a good feeling about this game. Too many people are saying this is going to be a cakewalk for the Steelers. I don't see anybody picking the Browns. I was like, well, I know one person that picked the Browns. So he was, I guess, right, but Boston is right. It's not like Allen's batting 1,000 there. But he asked me yesterday on the podcast if I felt like this was a bad loss. Like, does it completely change the way that I feel about the season? And, I sat on that for like a second before answering because I don't think that the result does. Like, dropping to 8-3 as opposed to 9-2, maybe it changes how you feel about, like I said before that, like if they could win that game, I might change their win total to like 12. I had them before the season at 10. But now with losing that game and what they have on the back stretch, yeah, I don't know that they're going to get the 12 wins. But point nor here nor there. But what I did feel like, honestly, what I am worried about is the warts that continue to show and rear their ugly heads with this offense. The short yardage situations, how they're not being able to convert, get 1 or 2 yards on 3rd or 4th down, how bad the red zone offense has been. I thought Art Smith had a rough night for sure. And I didn't think Tomlin was very good either, especially in the 3rd and 4th quarter. But with Art, like for me, more so than anything schematically that's being called, the personnel decisions, like I just don't get. They had a 3rd and 14 where George Pickens, Mike Williams, Calvin Austin, none of those 3 were on the field. They had a bunch of tight ends, Ben Skoranek on the field. Like, what are we doing? And then the 2-point play to try to take a field goal lead. What you come up with is a back.
Everybody knows that if you're trying to score 2 points, you need to throw a fade to your running back 3.
Yeah, I mean, so there's been some decisions over the last couple of weeks that I'm really questioning from that perspective. But those types of things I think more so are the way that I'm walking out of this game, maybe a little bit less confident about this team, more so than just the result. Like, again, losing this game, I think was definitely in the realm of possibility. But I'm starting to get concerned about this offense's ability to punch it into the end zone, to convert in short yardage situations. Like the money downs, they just haven't been very good at. And I don't know exactly what the reason is. Like they can move the ball, and then they get to like 3rd and 1, can't get that yard. They get into the red zone, can't punch it into the end zone. I don't have the rhyme or reason for it, but it's something that's obviously been the entire season. They were a little bit better with Justin Fields in there than Russ, but it was just Justin basically a play breaking down and him using his leg. So I don't know. Do you have a take on what might be the reason that they haven't been good in those areas?
Honestly, there's not a good one. Not a good one. I'll say that. I just think that maybe the Steelers, I don't know, overthink it, or maybe they just are calling some. Like when I look at the Thursday night game, there was I think it was a 3rd down, or no, I think it was a 4th down play for the Steelers, and they tried to just run it up the gut. And I'm like, you haven't been able to do that the entire night, and this is your 4th down play. Like I understand that is probably the most likely scenario of a 4th down call, but it just seems like that is a high risk scenario in that play.
The first 4th down call where they get the play call in super late. There's like 8 seconds left on the play clock when they get it in, and then they snap it with 2, and it's just Justin Fields running to the right.
That one was dead on arrival. They should have just taken the delay game and punted at that point. But hindsight's 2020. It's just situationally, this offense is so poor sometimes. Like what you're mentioning, in the 3rd down, 4th down, and short, it just seems like the play calling is questionable, and not only the play calling. I feel like play calling may not be as bad if they had the correct personnel in the game for some of these calls too. If the personnel's different, some of these calls might be flipped. Some of these plays might convert. But like you just mentioned, having several tight ends instead of your receivers on some of these plays, why are you doing that? It makes the red zone offense, I feel like, worse when you're doing that. And like you mentioned on the 2-point conversion play, on one side of the field, you had Cordell Patterson running a fade, and then on the other side you had Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington. Like, was there even a receiver on the field in that play?
I don't know. Actually,
you had Darnell Washington and Pat Freiermuth trying to run some sort of like pick play on the opposite side. Which, to be honest, why is Pat Freiermuth trying to set the pick instead of Darnell Washington in that scenario? It just seems like personnel to me is the bigger issue of the offense sometimes. And that's where I don't know if it all falls on Arthur Smith. Does it fall on Mike Tomlin in a sense as well with that? Because I'm sure that he plays into some of the decisions of who's on the field as well. I can't believe that it would all be Arthur Smith in these situations. And that's the most frustrating part, is that I thought that for what on Sunday was with the Ravens, where I thought that Mike Tomlin and company outcoached the Ravens, I felt like they were outcoached in this one. I just did not think from top to bottom, especially when you look at the problems that Tomlin had in the clock management, which came to heel in this one too. Like, I just thought from beginning to end, Cleveland was better coached in this one than it showed on the field.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I didn't think that there was like anything egregious that he did in the first half. Like, they had some pre-snap penalties and stuff like that, which, everybody wants to throw the word unprepared around when that happens. But like, dude, when are we going to see Cam Hayward take a procedural penalty on a field goal? Like that, it's just stuff that like doesn't happen. Like, so I don't even know how to chalk that up to coaching. But in the second half, for sure, like when you're talking about the clock management stuff, and I know that the refs did a really poor job with like explaining whatever in the world was going on with the intentional grounding, non-intentional grounding, illegal touching situation on that. But like, you give them the down back and have to burn a timeout just for them to convert on the next play anyway. Like, that was obviously, they really mangled that. And then not have it like when you got to huddle to the eyes and be like, hey, if Nick Chubb gets close to this goal line, pull him in, let him score.
Yeah.
And Nick Chubb didn't slide down. He was willing to score on that play, and they tackled him and, obviously let them burn some more clock there. So yeah, there was a lot of things I thought in the second half that wasn't great. And they took a timeout into the half. And I was wondering why they didn't call it early. And then on third down, Russ takes the sack, and then they're just like, okay, let's just go into the half. But yeah, not a great night for Mike Tomlin and this coaching staff. DB in here as well, and he's gone over the game multiple times. I actually didn't even, most of the games I watched back, I couldn't do it. So like, shout out to DB who's probably watched this thing back a couple times. I couldn't do it to myself. And in this one. But I wanted to also like mention, hey, like we're throwing a lot on the coaching staff right now and stuff like that. And certainly their job is to put players in positions to succeed. But the players themselves, I thought, especially the offensive line, the interior of the offensive line, Zach Frazier's been fantastic this year. I thought he finally had a bad game. But, you go across the board, obviously, Myles Garrett with what he did, you can point your finger at Dan Moore, but they didn't have a great game plan for helping him out.
That one I would put more on coaching. I thought the scheme for Myles Garrett was not good enough. You're going to chip him sometimes. Sometimes the chips didn't work, and Dan Moore is basically left by himself to cover Myles Garrett. That's not setting yourself up for success.
So let's talk about the inverse there in terms of the way that they were willing to, they move Myles Garrett around. They'll have him rush from different spots. They'll have him, do some stunts. They'll use him on a twist, like the one where he got right before half, where he ends up basically a one-on-one with Zach Frazier and just goes right through him. Like they'll use him in that regard. They'll use him a lot of different ways. Where it's like with TJ, we've seen him primarily just line up over a team's right tackle and try to win. And that makes it a lot easier to game plan for. You can use your tight end there. You can use a chip. You can basically put 3 guys over there that are going to make contact with TJ on one pass rush. Do you think that's becoming a problem? Do you think that they need to find ways to move TJ around more, whether it's a comfort thing or not? They're going to have to do it because you can't, if nobody else, it's not a problem if everybody else is winning their reps because you're kind of eliminating, like if he's taking 2 or 3 guys' attention, you're obviously limiting across the rest of the field who can block who. Like you're winning the numbers game then if you're taking 2 or 3 guys for TJ. But if nobody else is winning, is it going to become a problem for them that they are just rushing TJ over the right tackle?
I think so. Absolutely. And then I think that's been evident over the last 3 games. Looking at TJ, what he's done in these games, he's been mostly invisible. The only noticeable play that he's had in the last 3 weeks is the tackle for loss on Derrick Henry. Outside of that, he's had 7 total tackles, a couple tackles for losses, but no sacks in those games. I think that TJ, when the moment has to be biggest in some of these divisional games in the last 2 games, he hasn't been there. And I don't want to put that necessarily all on him because I think that is partially on the defense's like scheme around him. And if he's just going to sit on that one side, that's super basic and super easy for an offense to game plan around. If you're going to move him around like Myles Garrett, that's a little different. But I just think that TJ Watt, if he's going to continue to play in the same position that he has, I don't know what the Steelers defense is going to expect whenever offenses are keying on him more. And in the last 3 games, he hasn't been able to do anything, hasn't really had a big impact on the game. And people are getting frustrated about that. Steeler fans are getting frustrated about that, which, I mean, when you're having a player like TJ Watt not have an impact on any of these games, and then on the flip side of that, you see the type of game that Myles Garrett had. He completely took over that game for the Browns defense, who was eating up all night. It's kind of frustrating seeing the success on one side, especially with that guy and in that moment, and then TJ not being able to do what he's doing. If it's in the Steelers' benefit, I definitely think they need to give them different looks because I feel like the more you do it and the more success teams have against TJ, if they don't change anything, it's just going to be easier to defend.
This I missed this a couple minutes ago, but this is hilarious. Tyrone Johnson. I thought the Steel twins looked alike. Do you know who there's these Steelers? They're literally twins. Like they look exactly alike. And they have a YouTube channel. They do Steelers content. Great work, by the way. Go subscribe over there to them. But this is another person saying that we look alike, and this has happened a lot over the last few weeks, especially. So that's hilarious. Drew said, have they been more willing to move TJ around when Highsmith is playing? We've seen it in the past, but I don't think we've seen it much with Herbig. Well, the thing is this year, right? Like, I feel like Highsmith and Herbig have not been healthy at the same time. Like, they keep just trading who's injured right now and who's going to play. So hopefully next week we get Highsmith back against Cincinnati and we can see more of those 3-edge looks. And then sure, like theoretically you could use Highsmith and Herbig on the outside, maybe rush TJ over top. Over the center, they could do that, but I think it'd honestly be more Herbig than anybody else. I think that's the look that they've shown more than anything else. But you have the flexibility to do it, and that's what we're saying. Is that's what we're talking about in terms of moving him around, having the ability to do so, especially when you have all 3 guys at your disposal. It should be something that they do. So we'll see. I think, like, I can recall what game was it? Like, I've seen there was at least one game where TJ did move around a little bit. It hasn't been much. And, as much credit as I'll give Terrell Austin for starting to mix things up on the back end over the last couple of weeks, this is still one thing where I think that they gotta do more. You got to get TJ out of those situations where he's just rushing and it's very predictable where he's coming from. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Also, like, one thing that I want to say, just not necessarily about the Steelers' performance in this game, but just this game in general. I don't know how you felt. I don't know how anybody else felt. This is just my personal opinion of it. That was awesome to watch in that atmosphere. Like, I am a fan of watching football in those elements. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that. I wanted the chat's thoughts on that because they're trying to take away the game that we love by building a dome in Cleveland. This is what we saw Thursday night was beautiful. And this is before Thanksgiving. We're getting that type of environment. So what were your thoughts on it? What was your thoughts on watching a football game take place in a snow globe?
I thought it was beautiful. I think that football in elements is fun, and I understand that it can change the game. But honestly, the Steelers got better when the snow came out. So maybe the Steelers need to play in more snow games. But I think that football in that sort of way, yeah, especially Russ. But I think football in that way, especially with a snow game like that, maybe rainy games aren't as fun, especially for people in the stadium.
Oh, yeah, no.
But snow games, I feel like from a spectator specific view, and maybe people that were at the game feel differently, but I feel like even at the game that could be fun. But watching it on TV, I thought it was awesome, especially when the snow really started to come down and stick in the second half. I just thought that was a lot of fun. It didn't really affect the gameplay too. So the fact that you had a still quality football game, it wasn't like a mess with everybody sliding around while also having that snow. And then some of the videos and pictures that have come out after the game, like seeing the replays and slow-mo and everything. I mean, it's awesome. It's beautiful. And domes are a crime to football everywhere. I think domes should be outlawed for stadiums. If you can't play in the cold, then you can't play football. And that's the way it is. In Cleveland especially, like if you want to build a dome, that's kind of soft. And maybe this game was hinging on the decision for that. If they were going to get snow, maybe the outcome of this game actually sways the decision of whether they want a dome or not, because they won against the Steelers whenever it was snowing and they don't have a dome. Maybe they need to take care of that advantage. I mean, look at what George Pickens said after the game. And also, credit to Allen for getting him to say that. He's the one that asked the question. And then having that response. I mean, I'm sure Allen was thrilled at that response when he asked that question. But George Pickens saying that the weather was affecting them and helping the Browns, and the Browns aren't a good football team. I mean, if you're Cleveland and you hear that, you definitely don't want a dome. You need that advantage every single time you have it.
Yeah. I will say I jokingly kind of said this, but like, and when Jameis threw that pick, and he almost threw one to Beanie like right before, and then he threw a pick to Dante Jackson. I'm not 100% sure that he even saw anything, like any Steelers on the field, because of how it was snowing, just kind of blending in with the field. Like, I don't know, because it didn't seem like he was seeing defenders at that point. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. It was really awesome to watch a game take place with those elements. Obviously, it would have been a lot better if they came out with a win. I mentioned Russ in there. What did you make of his performance? I thought he wasn't very good in the first half. I thought he was pretty solid in the second half. Like from a completion like perspective, if you just look at the box score, it looks like he had a pretty nice day, but I thought he left a lot of plays on the field early. He rolls out, completes a pass to Darnell Washington for like 4 or 5 yards. So like, in the box score, it looks like 1 for 1, however many yards, cutting the yardage needed for a first down and a half. But Pat Freiermuth is like right behind him, throwing his hands up, and there's no defenders behind. Like he would have been in a foot race for the end zone. It could have been an 80-yard score. There's another one that Allen mentioned to me where he completes like a 40-yard ball to Calvin Austin, but it was a little bit underthrown. Like if it's out in front of him, we know Calvin's speed. That could have been 6. So like, it looks like 1 for 1, 40+ yard completion, but they end up settling for 3 there. They don't get into the end zone, and you could have been into the end zone on that same play. So what did you make of Russ's performance? I thought he got better as the game went on, but certainly if he played better in the first half, I don't even know if we're having a discussion about this.
Yeah, overall, I thought it was okay. I thought he did get better in the second half, which is funny enough. Like I mentioned, that's when the snow came out. So it's curious to see how a quarterback gets better when it's snowing like that. But I think that Russ in the first half to me was just too slow to make some of his decisions, holding on the ball too long. And that was frustrating to watch because it just seemed like some of the sacks were needless. And maybe that's a play that Russell Wilson makes like 5 or 6 years ago and escapes the pocket easier. but it just seems like he was focused on the pressure in the second half instead of reading the field. And then in the first half, second half, it felt like he was keeping his eyes more down the field in some of those plays. But there were receivers open that could have had plays made, and I just think that he was focused.
I thought Calvin could have had, like, from the little bit that I did watch back, and just some of the clips that I've seen, talking with Alan, talking with Nick, like Calvin Austin could have had a massive day in this one.
Yeah, I just think there was a lot left on the bone when it comes to Russell Wilson's performance. I think that comes back to him holding onto the football and kind of getting flat-footed in the pocket, and then the pocket collapsing around him, which I got to say, like, on both sides of the ball, I thought the Steelers were losing the line of scrimmage. I thought that the Browns were dominating them on both sides, but especially on the offensive side of the ball. I thought that the Steelers offensive line, this is the first performance where I could say, like, the unit looked pretty bad overall, and I just thought the Browns were having their way up front. And obviously that's going to affect Russell Wilson, but that's where I think that his focus may have been more on the pressure that was coming to him instead of looking downfield and trying to make a play with the ball. And like I said, that's maybe a play that he makes like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a play that he can escape the pocket and roll out and then find somebody down the field. But I just think he was too focused on the pressure, and ultimately that hurt them. I mean, he was sacked, 3 or 4 times in the game. He had that strip sack fumble. I just think that it was a combination of him holding onto the ball plus Browns having a good pass rush in the game. I just thought the Steelers' offensive line, especially in the first half, let them down. I thought in the second half they did get a little bit better, but overall just not a good night from the guys up front.
Yeah, Russ has a tendency, like, when he starts feeling that pressure, and I think this is a lot of quarterbacks where you're just like, you focus on that more than anything else, and your eyes start dropping. You're not looking down the field. You're too worried about, especially when you got a guy like Myles Garrett on the other side. You're always going to be trying to think about where's he at right now and worried that he's going to impact the play, even if you don't see him. Like on that strip sack, like he makes a play where Russ probably doesn't even know that he's by him. But yeah, Russ has had a tendency to do that, especially as he's gotten older, because I think that he's kind of still trying to like hold on to that athleticism that just isn't there anymore. He did have one he got out of the pocket on this one, got like a first down run or just short of a first down in this one. But like he's tried to extend plays and make plays that just like in his younger age, sure, he can do that, but not at this point in his career. What's really weird is, someone threw this out there, like how historical of a win it is for the Browns, just because of like, there's no reason that some of these things should have happened and they win this game. Bill Barnwell put this out there. They lost the turnover battle by 2, failed to convert even 2 third downs all game. They were 1 for 10, didn't score a return touchdown, were outgained in yards, and they won this game. Teams with that combination were 0-67 over the last 30 years before the Browns won tonight. And I'll be honest, the vibes for me were off pretty much all game once it started. Like I just didn't have a good feeling about it until the Dante Jackson pick. I thought we were going to end up winning this game at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And very well could have. And I'm not blaming him for this. It's his first bad one of the season. But like, again, we probably escaped there with like a 1-point win, and we could just be like bitching about the offensive performance in a win and saying what we need to do differently. If Corliss Waitman doesn't have a 15-yard punt. Like, again, it's his first bad one of the year. He's been great. He's been fantastic, and he was due for one of those. It's of course it happened in this game where everything else, like all the procedural penalties that they took. It's just like one of those games, man. Again, this is like their house of horrors. This is like Baltimore coming to Pittsburgh lately for us, is going to Cleveland.
Yeah, I thought there was a lot of this is a game where I feel like a lot of people would look at it from the outside if you haven't been watching the Steelers play in Cleveland in the last few years and say this is a fluky game. Like, how often are you going to have a 15-yard punt? How often are you going to go 1 for 10 on third down, but the team goes 4 for 4 on fourth down? I mean, on fourth down, their plays were...
Alan told me he specifically went around the locker room and asked as many guys as he could, how do you explain that? Like holding a team to 1 third down conversion, but them going 4 for 4 on fourth down. He said no one could answer it. Like they're all just like dumbfounded by the fact that happened.
Yeah, and then that's why, like, in hindsight, I was thinking about why accept the penalty on the illegal touching and just have it be 4th and 2. But then again, they converted all their other fourth downs, so you might as well just take the third down penalty and hope it happens. But obviously that didn't end up happening. They converted a 4th down on that play anyway. But their fourth down plays, like 4th and 1, a 5-yard rush, 4th and 1, a 4-yard rush, 4th and goal, a 2-yard rush for a touchdown, and a 4th and 3, 5-yard reception that finds Jerry Jeudy. I just think that if there was a game where you could say it's fluky for the Steelers, it is this one, and not in a fluky way that helps them, a fluky way against it. And I'm not going to try to take away credit from the Browns. I mean, the Browns won this game, but just outside looking at everything you just mentioned, looking at the 3rd down conversion rate to the 4th down conversion rate, it just is something that seems like a fluke. But at the same time, if you have watched the Steelers and Browns play the last 5 seasons, this isn't that fluky. Over the last 10 games within the division, the Browns have the best record, home or away, against the Steelers. The Cincinnati Bengals are the Cleveland Browns are now 5-5 against the Steelers. The Cincinnati Bengals are 6-4. The Ravens or I guess I should flip that. The Steelers are 5-5. Against the Bengals are 6-4, and against the Ravens they're 8-2 in their last 10 games against each of the divisional opponents. I don't think that this is that fluky of a game, but obviously looking at this stuff, it just seems like it's a weird game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the Browns taking advantage of that. Like in these types of games, when you do those kinds of things, you leave yourself open to the other team winning. Like that's what I said. I feel like they just, especially the way that this started, they left the door open all game for the Browns to be able to win, and then they score that last touchdown. And then afterwards, I mean, my God, you got 50 seconds still on the clock with a timeout, which they should have had too. But again, going back to Tomlin not having a very good game in this one.
I should have had like a minute and a half instead of 50 seconds, but
yeah, but like at that point, if you are down by anything more than a field goal, you know how the other team is going to defend it. They're going to play prevent defense. They're going to give you all the yardage in front of the end zone that you want, but they're just going to keep you out of the end zone. The Steelers barely crossed midfield. Like horrible. Like everything about this game, man. Like there's just so many things that I keep going back to, and it's just like I think 8 plays really determine this one. Like if 8 plays go differently, we're talking about a different outcome. But here we are. And the Browns get a victory on Thursday night. There was something else and again, going back to like, I'm not saying that this determined the game, but and you know that like I'm never going to say the officials determined the game, but they were not good on Thursday night. Like objectively, and I'm saying that for both sides, but especially like you mentioned that Jameis Winston touchdown run, Jermaine Ifedi drops back. Nick Herbig fakes like he's dropping into coverage and then rushes. Ifedi reacts so slowly to this happening that all he can do is just grab Nick Herbig, literally pulls him back. Like Herbig's already basically past him, and he just holds on for dear life against Herbig to slow him down for a second. Now, holding this, especially with this officiating staff, they don't call it a ton, but like in a play like that is textbook. Like holding doesn't get called a ton because it's not directly impacting the play. Nick Herbig is like this close away from Jameis Winston when he gets held. You got to call that one. And then I don't know what happens, but I'm just saying like that directly resulted in a touchdown right there for the Browns. That should not have been. On that same play, Keanu Benton was also held, but I don't know.
I would say you can see it in the replay that I think that NFL or Prime or I guess it might have been Max, like HBO, putting in out of the replay of that touchdown. You can see Benton's jersey get pulled in the replay, like in the slow-mo.
Yeah. You know what I just realized, too, when you said about Max? Man, that game's going to be in Hard Knocks. Son of a...
it is. That's the first game for the Steelers to be on Hard Knocks.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people thought the Ravens one was just because it was like in divisional play, but they've been filming some stuff like outside, but they weren't doing it for the show yet in terms of the games that they were filming for it. So, dang, that sucks. All right, well, I don't know if I have many other thoughts that I haven't already discussed, unless you do. If anybody has like questions or thoughts as well that we can chime in on. Our boy's back.
The Browns beat us also. Got to admit, the Browns have a good and talented defense. I hate the Browns. Yeah. I mean, this is something that is I normally think is like a soft thing to say, and as a BYU fan, it kind of relates to what some BYU fans were trying to say about when they lost to Kansas last week. Like that is like the best 3-6 team that you could have played against. Like the Browns, if we want to be real, are like one of the better 2-8 teams from a roster standpoint. Like from looking at their roster, they are one of the better teams that would have that type of record. But the thing that has held the Browns back, at least the last 2 seasons, has been the quarterback position mostly. And so
Yeah,
from
but
that
like
standpoint, like I guess if you want to look at it that way, but
he's mentioned the defense, and they've been very good for the most part under Jim Schwartz, but like the numbers don't back it up this year. It's weird. Like I understand, like not having JOK is massive. Like you've seen that hole in the middle of that defense for sure. But there's so many guys on the back end that I feel like have taken a step back this year. Like Martin Emerson was awesome last year, hasn't been very good this year. Juan Thornhill, I mean, he stinks. Like I know Browns fans want to get rid of. He also just, if you go back and watch, he does not look interested in playing right now. He looks like he's playing on a 2-8 team, and he's just checked out. Which, by the way, he's one of those dudes that made the mistake of getting a tattoo for the team that he currently plays for. So he has a Browns tattoo. I'm not so sure he's going to be playing for the Browns in 2025, but that's neither here nor there. There's just so many guys that are on that defense that were awesome last year that have just all collectively taken a step backwards. So yeah, they have the talent there. Like look at that corner trio: Ward, Newsome, and Emerson. Delpit out of LSU is awesome as well. I don't know what it's been this year, but they are definitely a better unit on paper than what they've shown. And maybe this was a step in the right direction for them, and they're going to be lights out the rest of the year. I don't know. I like Jim Schwartz a lot as a defensive coordinator, though. And obviously, when you have a guy like Myles Garrett up front to set the tone, and the guys they do on the back end, they should be better than what they've been.
yeah, and like I mentioned, like the Steelers on both sides of the ball lost the line of scrimmage, but it was very noticeable when the Steelers were on offense. I just thought that the Browns' defensive line was basically having their way. I mean, you mentioned earlier that this was Zach Frazier's first like actual bad game that he's had. I thought it was very noticeable in the middle of the Steelers line too. Yeah, I mean,
and they couldn't have Samalo. They were basically just having him help out Dan Moore. Like Samalo really wasn't given attention up the middle to help out a guy like Zach Frazier because he was too focused on helping out Dan Moore. So like, yeah, I think that there was a lot of things that went wrong up front for them, and collectively as an offensive line, like this is the first game where we're not just saying, oh, look at the performance of, let's circle the performance of one guy like Broderick Jones or something like that. Like collectively, they were just not a good unit, and they got their butts kicked on a short week on Thursday.
Yeah, and I mean,
and maybe that's
what's going to happen.
And maybe that's part of it. Like, again, I'm not trying to make an excuse for these guys. These are going to happen. But, like, specifically in the case of their two rookies, Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick, this is the first time they had to play in a short week like this, especially in the division, in a game very physical against Baltimore and then very physical against the Browns. Maybe, they just weren't ready for that. I don't know. But obviously they're going to have to be better going forward.
Yeah, I just think that the Steelers, I don't know if I would say they needed a game like this, but this game really exposed some things that were still bigger issues that we've talked about, like especially personnel decision-making on the offense, play calling at times. Like the Steelers have 10 days to figure out how to get their down and distance and short areas of the field figured out, get their red zone offense figured out, because you're playing Cincinnati in 9 points. 9 days, you're going to have to store points. I do not believe that the Steelers are going to be able to walk away from that game winning 17-14 or something like that. I feel like the Cincinnati offense is too good. They're going to get theirs. You got to figure out it offensively. Otherwise, it's going to be another rough one for you. And I mean, what can you say? That's AFC North football. That's what this boils down to, is that these divisional games, despite record, it's going to be a tough matchup no matter what. That's what you saw on Thursday night. That Thursday was literally the epitome of what everybody is talking about with AFC North football. A tough, gritty, hard-nosed matchup between two pitted rivals in the snow. I mean, that is something that every AFC North fan dreams of for their team. It just didn't end up in the Steelers' favor.
This is the last thing that I want to touch on before we get out of here. I like how they gave us a warning before this. Steelers better not sleep on the Bengals. Their offense is dangerous, in all caps. I'll be pulling for you guys. Don't want to see Bengals in the playoffs. Still hate y'all, though. LOL. Respect. Yeah, I mean, feelings mutual. We talked about that. This is like Baltimore, team that we hate, but it's literally just the 60 minutes that we're playing them. They are the closest thing in terms of a parallel to the Steelers as a franchise. I feel like both very well run. Both want to build through the draft over free agency, models for success. So I have a ton of respect for what the Ravens do over there, and I hate Cincinnati and Cleveland a whole lot more. But let's talk.
They are 1 o'clock and 11 o'clock on the face of a clock. They're closer to each other than they are to everybody else. even though they're not the same.
I like that. Nice. Anyways, we kind of touched on this, and I don't want to dig too far into this because obviously next Saturday we'll talk about this matchup with the Bengals. But what I will say is I think this is at least within the division, the toughest task for them defensively, the way that Cincinnati spreads them out. They'll go 5 wide, they'll go empty a ton, and they'll really challenge the Steelers' ability to defend every blade of grass on the field. Like, I think they have a blueprint already that we've seen in the past for defending the Ravens, and for Tyler, that was a bar. Yeah, Frick liked it too. For defending the Ravens and the Browns, and they've been successful in doing so. Like, even if they haven't beaten the Browns, it's not like the Browns are scoring a bunch of points against them in those games. Like, defensively, they've been fine in terms of defending them. The Bengals, on the other hand, we've seen the Bengals explode offensively in games against the Steelers and expose their weaknesses. Now, I think this is where the free agent additions of a guy like Patrick Queen, of a guy like Deshaun Elliott, really come into shaping up what they wanted this defense to be. Like, identifying what the weaknesses were from last year, plugging these guys in. It was with the idea of stopping teams like this, getting more team speed on the back end, and being able to defend teams like the Cincinnati Bengals, who, again, can spread you out and make you defend every blade of grass. So I think that they're more equipped now to do it. They still are obviously going to have to go out there on Sunday to do it. But from a personnel standpoint, I don't think they've ever been in a better position to defend Cincinnati.
Yeah, and it's going to be a tough task. I mean, the Bengals are 4-7.
And getting Alex Highsmith back.
Yeah, Alex Highsmith back. Bengals are 4-7, but they have the 6th ranked scoring offense in the NFL. I mean, they can put up points. It's going to be a tall task, but I think it's going to be a bigger task for the Steelers offense to potentially keep up in this game, because even though Cincinnati's defense has shown issues this season, and then they can definitely give up some points, just like their offense can put up points. I think that the Steelers' offensive struggles that we've seen the last 2 weeks are concerning. I think, like we mentioned, third and fourth and short and red zone have been a big issue for the Steelers these last couple of weeks. And I think that if that continues to happen, I don't trust that the Steelers are going to be able to put up 28, 31, 34 points in these games if you're continuing to struggle in those situations. And that's where I think that situationally the Steelers need to get better offensively. If you move the ball well on first and second down between the 20s, that's fine and dandy. But if you're having to settle for field goals like you were against the Ravens, I don't trust that you're going to be able to keep up in this game.
Yeah. You mentioned Cincinnati's defense is the last thing I'll say before we get out of here, because, again, I don't want to say everything that we're going to end up saying next Saturday. But my take on their defense is their secondary is single-handedly preventing Joe Burrow from being in the MVP conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean,
because Trey Hendrickson's been awesome.
Joe Burrow is he leading the league in passing yards this season?
I mean, he's top 3 in like everything.
Yeah, he's top 3 in everything. Jamar Chase is like number 1 right now in receiving yards.
Burrow leads in passing yards and passing touchdowns. Chase in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns. Trey Hendrickson leads in sacks, and they're 4-7.
Yeah, that's you're going to need to see a 300+ yard performance out of your boy next Sunday, which, like you mentioned, a week from now, we will talk about on Steelers Saturday Sit Down again to actually preview that game. Just a little snippet right now. We'll see if we have an actual Steelers episode this week. We're not sure. Up in the air. As for Tyler, ASU, baby. Go Sun Devils. Yeah, I was going to say hope Utah wins to Iowa State, but because of that comment, never mind.
Love it. Anyways, appreciate everybody for being part of the live chat. Of course, comment back if you were watching later on. Let us know your thoughts on this game against the Browns. This is a bit different than every week that we've done up until this point, because we're talking about a game that already happened as opposed to previewing one, where we'll be back next Saturday to talk about that game against the Cincinnati Bengals and what we expect to see, the key matchups, along with our predictions for it. Until then, Tyler, anything else you want to add?
No, go check out our Penguins episode if you want to be depressed this weekend. And I hope that the Steelers are going to figure out offensively, because we knew that the back half of the schedule was going to be rough regardless, just because of the opponents. But if they continue to struggle offensively, I mean, it could get worse than what we thought it was going to be.
Also, literally from today, 3 weeks from today, we will be cutting off the donations for Rocking Around the 412. So go donate.
Yes.
If you haven't yet, share it. If you haven't yet, you never know whose eyes and ears you can get on that mission. Every single penny donated goes directly to impacting kids in the 724 and 412 area, giving them a Christmas that Tyler and I never had to worry about growing up, the best one that we could possibly give them. Try to get everything on their lists, whether it is from a local family or the East Rochester Salvation Army off their angel tree. Been doing the Salvation Army thing's been going on for 3 years, but we've been doing the mission itself since 2018. Raised over $36,000 in the process. 167 kids have had their Christmas granted to them through this mission that we've been doing. So appreciate you guys for donating. If you donate at least $10, you'll be eligible to win some prizes. The grand prize being Penguin tickets. You know, it is what it is. We can't control how the team plays, but that's where we're at. I mean, maybe you consider something else the grand prize then. Pat Frymuth autographed jersey, Jared Jones autographed jersey, Steelers jersey of choice, Pirates jersey of choice, 2 Game Changer shirts, 2 Around the 412 hoodies, an autographed training camp image by 21 people within the Steelers organization, players, front office personnel, coaches, all on that thing. And then a James Daniels game-worn visor from last year's Monday Night Football game against the Cleveland Browns. So donate at least $10. You'll be eligible to win one of those prizes. Yeah.
Honestly, an Around the 412 hoodie probably will have higher value when we're actually giving out the prizes than the Penguins tickets will.
It will probably be more expensive. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And Boston said if he wins, he wants us to autograph it. So that might take the value back down. Good. That might line it up with the Penguins just a little bit because it will come back down a little bit.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's how it parallels. Follow us on everything at Around the 412. And let us know if you want us to make a blue sky. I asked that on their Steelers and Penguins episodes, but let us know. If we get enough yeses, we'll make one, for the couple weeks before it dies out. So let us know on that as well. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know when we go live or another video is posted. But again, appreciate you all for tapping in. Till next time, for Smitty, for Tyler, this has been another Steelers Saturday Sit Down. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.